Days before Sheriff Gary Toelke ended his 28-year career as the sheriff here for Franklin County, a combined 41 years serving his community, I sat down with him in an interview, one that you'll probably never see and have never seen. We don't just talk about him and the national spotlight cases that brought attention to him. We talk about a lot of the guys behind the scenes. His deputy chief for almost 28 years, Major Mike Copeland.
1988, that election, and you've said that it was you and Major Copeland loved working here, and were concerned about who it was. So you thought, hey, we'll give it a whirl.
Yeah, and Mike and I, you know, we went to high school, well, even grade school together. We
Cub Scouts.
Yeah, knew each other since Cub Scouts, and neither one of us are what I would consider a political animal. No. Usually if you're in politics, you've got a type A personality, and obviously a sheriff, in a sense, is a politician, or, you know, they have to run for office. But Mike and I, we were more like a C or C minus. You know, we didn't like crowds and that sort of thing. When Sheriff Bruns announced that he wasn't going to run anymore, there were like 6 candidates that filed, and there was one candidate where Mike and I felt if he would win, then Mike and I wouldn't have a job. And not only that, I don't know that we would have wanted to stay here. And both of us really liked our job, so we thought, what the heck are we going to do here? And we just decided that we'd give it a shot. Mike was a Democrat back then, and I was a Republican. And we came to the agreement. I'm sure a lot of people have heard that if I won, he would be the chief deputy, and if he won, I'd be the chief deputy. And that year was kind of like this year, I guess. It was a Republican landslide, or I say landslide. Republicans, won pretty strong in Franklin County, which they usually do. But then I think I had a few more relatives than Mike did. So, yeah.
What made you want to come back to Union after you went to military police training?
Well, I've lived here all my life, and went to East Central College for a while. Played basketball there in Union High School, and I just really like it around here. And
I have to ask. How did you meet her? Are you high school sweethearts? It's always, back then it was kind of common.
Yeah, and I say my family's local. Actually, her family, her dad was in the Marine Corps. I think she lived in 12 different states while he was in the Corps. But that's where we met, was in high school. And they had talked about moving down to South Carolina at one time, and that was kind of devastating because we were just kids then, but then they changed their mind and decided to stay here because we got married out of high school, and then it was actually right after I got back from my military training, and and Sandy told me, she said, we're not moving, because she, like I said, she went to 12 different schools, I think, during her time, and she said, we're staying here, so that's fine with me. So,
how did she, and over the years, support you in?
Oh, very much. I think probably being in a military family kind of helped a little bit because you've got you're gone, but very supportive. It doesn't take her long to make a friend. I think she knows more people than I do, and people probably like her a lot better than they do me.
But without her, you wouldn't be the person you are.
Oh no, definitely not. Yeah, she can tell. When things are going bad, and she can tell when things are going good, but she gives me my space. If she knows there's something, just like some of the major cases that we've had, she'll just kind of stay in the background and don't say anything and let me do my thing. And if I ask her to do something, she's there. You can't beat her.
I call it the Sheriff Gary Toelke and Major Mike Copeland legacy.
Mm-hmm.
He definitely was way behind the scenes, but played as big of a role in the department, becoming what it is today.
I constantly have people coming up to me and talking to me about things that that the major had said, comments that he'd made, things that they had learned from him, even out on the range. Mike was a gun nut, and he loved that range and loved shooting for that matter. And he was a wealth of knowledge because he'd been here obviously a long time, and again, kind of like me, he went through the ranks and learned all the ropes coming up, and people had a lot of respect for him and what he stood for, especially, and some of the things that he had taught them. It's pretty amazing how many people, and it's amazing how much he's been missed since he passed away.
In the time here, the most common response I've gotten from so many people, and even the feeling I get the second I walk in the door is family. Mm-hmm. That this is a family. How are you and Major Copeland able to foster that and develop that culture here?
Yeah. Well, and it is kind of like a family. I mean, you have arguments, you have disagreements, you have good times, bad times, and Mike in his family, I think he applied as best he could, what he does in his family, and I did the same in mine. To kind of, nobody's perfect, and you have to look at people for who they are. Look at their faults and try to improve. But you have to, learn to accept that. And Mike and I tried to do that. And you have your disagreements, you deal with it in as positive a way as you can, and then you move on. I mean, if you held a grudge against everybody every time you got mad at them, you couldn't get along with anybody. And we tried to stay away from that. But
they called you mom and dad. They feared the major more than they feared you.
Oh, they were. It's a couple. It was like it's like they were the mom and dad of the family. Yeah, and a lot of people played it that way. If dad said no, go ask mom. And a lot of times mom would have already talked to dad and said, if dad said no, no means no.
They were literally the same soul in two bodies. They were so entwined with each other. It was never one. It was one, but it was both. It was really kind of strange, but they were just so in tune with each other and so of the same belief in where they wanted the office to go and how they felt about people that it was.
How much of a role did Major Copeland play?
Oh my gosh, major.
When you guys did lose Major Copeland, how did that affect your family?
Well, a lot. I still, find myself in Mike. Mike was really good at remembering the past, and people, and I still find myself going to, something will happen, and I think, oh gosh, and I need to ask Mike, and Mike's not here, but he would know, and I wasn't the only one. People would go to him all the time, and ask him about different old cases and people, and very good with names and just decisions on things. That was definitely a big loss to us, and people still miss him.
How much of that did that play in a role in the last 2 years being, as you said, tough?
Yeah, well, it was, and it's another reason I finally decided to go ahead and retire. But it definitely had an impact on it.
There were words that when we talked that they explained, and we are going to talk about you for a moment here. Family and relationships, humble, good Christian man, leader, down to earth, one of us. How does that make you feel that at the end of your career is what people think of you?
Well, pretty humbling. You wonder if it does make an impact on people, and if they're saying that, then that's pretty gratifying.
And it wasn't just you; it was you and Major Copeland that they said that.
And Mike's the same way,
And the other thing was, you never had a qualm for standing up for what was right. What is popular is not always right, and what is right is not always popular.
That's right.
And it didn't matter about being elected. It mattered about doing what was right. Yeah,
that's where your politics comes in, and Mike and I both have always tried to stay away from that. There have been some things that we've done that weren't politically correct, but we felt it was right. I always use the analogy, when something happens, as far as politics being involved in law enforcement, I don't think it has a place at all. And, I've mentioned before in some other interviews that Judge Davis once told me that, the sheriff is an arm of the court and you don't get involved in politics, and I've always stayed by that. But if we have something major happen in the county where we need help, I don't call Chief Bruni or somebody and say, hey, we got a homicide, send me 2 Republicans and 3 Democrats. it don't work that way, and we could, in law enforcement, we could care less, what the political thing is, and at least most of us. Yeah, that's something I just felt doesn't have any room in law enforcement. I'm sure there's times people say, well, yeah, that was a political move, and it may appear that way, but it wasn't the intention. The intention was that we thought it was the right thing to do.
Looking at a few things that you've had to address, one being meth in Franklin County. At one point it was considered the worst in the county. And talking to Jason Grellner, when they came to you about this being a problem, you weren't about, okay, we need to investigate this, we need to get numbers. It was, hey, this is a problem, let's go after it.
A lot of sheriffs wouldn't allow that. They would look at it as a political issue and be worried about where their votes were going to come from the next election. Gary always wanted to do the next right thing. Sometimes what is right isn't popular, but a lot of times what's popular isn't right. And for Gary, it was always about doing the right thing, whether it was popular or not.
Well, it was obvious that the need was how dangerous the drug was. We had several people that had really close calls with the labs, Jason being one of them. He went through a booby trap one time, luckily didn't blow his foot off. He inhaled some substance one time, and so in fire and EMS too, I mean, they were exposed to this thing, and it was obvious the danger was there, and something definitely needed to be done, and needed to be done as soon as possible. And I know a lot of the things that we did there weren't popular, the Schedule 3 issue, but when you look back, it worked. The labs, if we take credit for anything, it's hiring good people. And the ones that we've hired have helped us get here. I mean, I've said this many times, these people have been a godsend to me as far as being a supervisor, because it's what they do that I'm responsible for. And when that happens, I get to talk about what they do, and it's positive, and that's really made my job easy. I mean, they're the ones out there that are, working the trenches, and they're having the contact with the public, and I'm really proud of that over the years.
Captain Steve Elliott is another person who had a huge impact on the Sheriff's Department. However, he lost his battle with cancer and passed away August 21st, 2015.
Very big, very, very big. Steve was very humble, and another one that really didn't seek the limelight that much. And there was a lot about him that people didn't know in respect of his talent.
To Captain Steve, he spent a substantial portion of his career teaching young deputies and people underneath him how to do the job rightly. Yeah. Not just right, but how to behave rightly, how to set your priorities, how to do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. And so he spent a lot of time in the gym. He was very into physical fitness, being ready for that moment where you might have to save somebody's life, and you have to bring your A game every day. Yep. And he lived that, and he spent a substantial portion in the classroom, which is right next to it, obviously, and so that was dedicated to him. Much like Major Copeland spent a substantial portion on the firing range, and that was really his niche, and he taught his craft to the deputies coming underneath him, and those two men, they will have generational effects to good police work in this area.
I never forget he was always talking about Dan Inosanto. They called him Guru Inosanto, and he was a student of Bruce Lee, who was, some people wouldn't even know who that is, but anyway, Bruce was a big guy. I mean, he was very popular back in years ago, and Steve had talked about being certified under Guru Dan and some of these other martial arts experts that are nationally known. And he and I went down to L.A. one time to pick up a prisoner. So that afternoon we got there about noon, I guess. And he said, "Hey," he says, "Guru Dan's studio is just down the road a ways." And Dan Inosanto's been in movies and all that sort of thing. And so he said, would you mind if I went down and trained with him a little bit? So I thought, okay, you know, we'll see. Put your money where your mouth is, or whatever you want to call it. So I said, yeah, let's go down there and you know, see what they're doing. So we go into the place, and there's Bruce Lee stuff all over the place, and so actually some of his memorabilia that he trained with. And we go into the gym, and there's probably 15 people in there, and they're doing sticks, you know, all that, and some of the other stuff. And you could see Dan Inosanto in the back of the gym, and Steve goes, hey, Dan. And he goes, hey, Steve. And, you know, he wanted to know, he says, hey, I'm going to be in town for about, you know, a couple hours. He said, can I work out with you for a little bit? And he said, yeah. He says, go ahead. So he says, grab some sticks. So Steve got the sticks in there. He went right in just like he was been doing it every day, you know, and that was pretty impressive.
Coming up in part 2, we'll talk about Baby Abby, Ben Owenby, and Sean Hornbeck, but from a different angle. How it impacted Sheriff Toelke, the feeling and atmosphere in the office days after, as well as some very special, intimate moments he shared with his longtime friend, the late Major Mike Copeland.
And so I went outside, and that's when he told me that, and I thought, oh, geez. And then all of a sudden, no, he said, well, wait a minute. He says, now they're saying it's alive. He said, I don't know, Ned. I heard him say something like, get up. Get up here, or something like that. I kind of get emotional. But